What if Ogedei Khan hadn't died in 1241, allowing the Mongols to sweep across all of Europe? The medieval kingdoms would have crumbled like dominoes. France, England, the Holy Roman Empire, gone. No European armies meant no crusades. The Islamic Golden Age would have flourished under Mongol religious tolerance. Chinese technology would have reached Europe 2 centuries early. Gunpowder, printing, navigation tools, all arriving through direct Mongol rule. Universities wouldn't have grown from Christian monasteries. Instead, Chinese-style academies would have dominated European learning. The Silk Road would have extended to Atlantic ports, connecting Asia directly to Europe's western coast. Here's the shocking part. The Black Death might never have spread. No European resistance meant no refugee movements carrying the plague. Without the devastation, there would be no Renaissance. The preserved Islamic and Chinese knowledge would have made it unnecessary. Christianity would have developed as just one faith among many under Mongol pluralism. Europe might have launched global exploration centuries earlier, starting from Atlantic shores. One death changed everything. Did you know that in 1313, a Mongol Khan slowly boiled his enemies alive while eating dinner just feet away? Uzbek Khan had just seized control of the Golden Horde after a brutal civil war that tore the Mongol Empire apart. His first act as ruler was to capture the generals who served his rival Takhta. He ordered massive bronze cauldrons filled with water and placed over roaring fires. As the water began to bubble, he had the captured men lowered in slowly, feet first. Their screams echoed through his palace as Uzbek calmly continued his feast, watching every moment. But this was just the beginning of his reign of terror. Over the next decade, he flayed enemies alive, fed prisoners to starved wolves, and crucified traitors on the open steppes. He forced entire tribes to convert to Islam or face complete extermination. In his personal torture chamber beneath the capital city of Sarai, he personally oversaw the deaths of over 1,000 political enemies. His calculated brutality unified the fractured Golden Horde through pure fear. Did you know a medieval queen once burned her own husband alive for cheating on her? In 603 AD, Queen Brunhild of the Visigoths discovered her husband King Sigebert was having an affair with a Saxon princess. But this wasn't just any queen. Brunhild was a powerful Frankish royal who had married into Visigothic nobility to secure a political alliance. For months, she carefully planned her revenge in complete silence. She ordered workers to build a massive execution pyre right in the palace courtyard, telling everyone it was for enemies of the state. When everything was ready, she revealed the truth. Guards dragged both the king and his mistress to the stake as the entire court watched in horror. She forced her husband to watch his lover burn first, her screams echoing through the palace walls. Then came his turn. The flames consumed the king as Brunhild watched without emotion. This single act of brutal justice established her absolute power over the kingdom. Medieval royal revenge had found its template. Here are 5 things you didn't know about the Persian immortals' brutal tactics. First, during the siege of Babylon in 539 BC, Cyrus the Great's elite warriors literally chained captured enemy soldiers to their shields. This forced Babylonian defenders to kill their own people just to fight back. Second, archaeologists at Persepolis discovered iron chains and restraint systems specifically designed for this human shield tactic. The evidence was buried in the ruins for over 2,000 years. Third, the 10,000 immortals maintained their numbers by replacing fallen warriors, but also by forcing captured enemies to march in front of their formations. Fourth, Greek historians recorded that Persian forces used this psychological warfare at Thermopylae itself. They forced Greek slaves to advance first while the immortals followed safely behind. Fifth, this human shield tactic was so effective it became standard Persian military doctrine. Cuneiform tablets found in ancient archives contain actual training manuals describing proper chaining techniques. They even documented the psychological impact on enemy morale. Ancient warfare was far more brutal than we imagined. What if Alexander the Great never died from fever in 323 BC, but lived to complete his grand conquests? At 32, he controlled an empire from Greece to India, but his death shattered everything into fragments. If he had survived, Rome would never have risen to power. Alexander's armies would have crushed the small Roman Republic before it could expand beyond Italy. His planned conquest of Arabia and the Western Mediterranean would have created a unified empire from Spain to India. Greek would have become the universal language 2,000 years earlier than Latin ever did, but here's the most shocking consequence. Christianity might never have existed. Alexander's continued eastern campaigns would have brought Buddhism west into Europe through Greek trade routes. Buddhist monasteries could have spread across the Mediterranean, filling the spiritual void that Christianity later occupied. Greek rational thought combined with Indian mathematics and Persian astronomy would have accelerated scientific progress by centuries. Instead of Rome's empire lasting centuries, we might have seen a Greek-dominated world lasting millennia. One man's survival could have completely rewritten Western civilization. Did you know the world's first bank operated in ancient Babylon around 2000 BC, complete with interest rates and deposit accounts that modern banks still use today? The House of Agibi in 6th century BC Babylon issued the first known checks and maintained detailed records on cuneiform tablets. They even operated international money transfers across the entire Persian Empire. Archaeologists found thousands of clay tablets in Baghdad showing complex financial instruments and mortgage agreements. These wouldn't appear in Europe until the Renaissance, over 1500 years later. Babylonian banks established the first credit system, letting merchants borrow money for trade expeditions with collateral agreements. Banking houses like Murashu and Sons operated for over 500 years, maintaining client relationships across generations. They had sophisticated accounting methods that put medieval Europe to shame. But when Babylon fell, all this knowledge vanished completely. European banking didn't rediscover these practices until Italian merchants studied surviving Mesopotamian tablets in the 13th century. Ancient Babylon invented modern banking, then the world forgot for over 1,000 years. Did you know that one Ottoman sultan murdered 19 of his own brothers in a single day just to secure his throne? In 1595, Mehmed III had just become Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, but according to Ottoman law, any of his brothers could challenge his rule and start a civil war, so he made a horrifying decision. On a cold morning, palace guards dragged all 19 of his younger brothers from their chambers. The Sultan watched from his marble balcony as each brother was thrown alive into the palace lion den. The lions had been starved for days. His youngest brother was only 11 years old, crying and begging for mercy as the guards carried him toward the snarling beasts. Mehmed forced every court official to witness the massacre. Even the palace guards, used to violence, were shaking with horror. By sunset, an entire generation of Ottoman princes was gone. The brutal display shocked even the hardened Ottoman court. This unprecedented slaughter marked the beginning of the empire's decline, eliminating potential leaders forever. Did you know Napoleon Bonaparte was once defeated by hundreds of rabbits in his own backyard? In 1807, fresh from his victory at the Battle of Wagram, the emperor planned a grand rabbit hunt to celebrate at his estate. His chief of staff was ordered to gather hundreds of rabbits for the sporting event. But when the cages opened, something went terribly wrong. Instead of scattering into the woods, the rabbits charged directly at Napoleon and his generals. They swarmed up their uniforms, climbed onto their shoulders, and refused to retreat. Napoleon himself fled toward his carriage, desperately trying to shake off the furry attackers. His marshals grabbed sticks and began beating away the relentless assault. The problem? His staff had bought domestic rabbits instead of wild ones. These weren't afraid of humans, they associated people with food. For nearly an hour, the man who conquered most of Europe was chased across his own estate by hungry livestock. The emperor who defeated Austria and Prussia had finally met his match. What if ancient Mesopotamian priests at the ziggurat of Ur were performing successful heart surgery 4,000 years before modern cardiac medicine? Clay tablets from 2000 BC describe detailed procedures for removing arrowheads from beating hearts using bronze instruments. These weren't primitive attempts at medicine. Archaeological evidence shows surgical tools sharper than modern scalpels, made from obsidian imported from Turkey specifically for operations. They developed anesthesia using opium poppies and alcohol combinations, with success rates that wouldn't be matched until the 19th century. But here's the mind-blowing part. Sumerian medical texts contain anatomical drawings of heart chambers and blood vessels that European doctors didn't discover until the Renaissance. They had advanced cardiac knowledge 3,000 years before Western medicine. What if we lost centuries of medical progress when these civilizations fell? Imagine how different history would be if this knowledge had survived. We might have conquered heart disease millennia ago, ancient wisdom buried in clay waiting to be rediscovered. Did you know that a forgotten Egyptian queen may have ruled the world's first global empire 1,500 years before Rome? In 2019, archaeologists made a shocking discovery about Queen Nithotep of Egypt's 6th dynasty. Around 2200 BC, she controlled trade routes spanning 3 continents. Recent excavations in Sudan revealed her administrative seals deep in Nubian gold mines. Identical seals were found in Lebanese cedar forests and Anatolian copper deposits. Hieroglyphic records show she maintained diplomatic correspondence with rulers from the Indus Valley to Morocco's Atlantic coast. Egyptian goods bearing her cartouche have been discovered in archaeological sites from Britain to Afghanistan. Her trade network was massive, connecting civilizations that shouldn't have known each other existed. But here's the twisted part. Later male pharaohs couldn't tolerate a woman's imperial success. They deliberately erased her from official records, wiping her achievements from history. For over 4,000 years, her global empire remained hidden. Modern archaeologists are only now realizing this forgotten queen ruled the ancient world's first truly global empire. Her story was buried by jealous men who feared her legacy. Did you know an Aztec emperor fed live prisoners to jaguars for entertainment? In 1519, Spanish conquistador Bernal Diaz witnessed something horrifying in Tenochtitlan. Emperor Moctezuma II personally dragged captured Tlaxcalan warriors to his royal zoo. The palace complex housed thousands of predators, but the jaguars were his favorites. Prisoners were forced into the pit with only obsidian clubs to defend themselves. Moctezuma watched from his golden throne, placing bets with nobles on how long each victim would survive. The feeding schedule was planned perfectly. Different animals received different types of prisoners. His favorite jaguar had killed over 200 men and wore a collar made from their finger bones. During grand ceremonies, multiple prisoners were released at once into the pit. Court musicians played drums while the cats tore apart screaming victims. Blood soaked into the stone as nobles cheered from above. The Aztecs believed these brutal shows fed the gods through their earthly representatives. When the Spanish arrived, they found bones scattered throughout the entire complex. Entertainment had become mass execution. What if Genghis Khan never died in 1227 but lived another 50 years, continuing his conquest until age 115? By 1250, Mongol armies would have swept through all of Europe, from London to Rome. His forces would have crossed into Japan and Southeast Asia, then pushed through Siberia toward the Americas. The Islamic Golden Age would never happen, with Baghdad and Damascus under permanent Mongol control. Chinese gunpowder and printing would spread globally 3 centuries early, revolutionizing warfare and knowledge. But here's the shocking part. The Black Death would never devastate Europe. Unified Mongol medical knowledge would contain outbreaks before they spread. The Crusades become impossible with Christian Europe under Mongol rule. Instead of Christian dominance, world religions develop under Mongol tolerance. Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity would blend and evolve differently. By 1280, one empire would stretch from London to Beijing to potentially the New World, humanity's first truly global civilization, centuries ahead of schedule. One man's extended life could have advanced civilization by 500 years. Did you know Genghis Khan believed he could steal his enemies' strength by eating their hearts while still beating? In 1206, after defeating the Merkid chief Togrul, Khan did something that shocked even his own warriors. He cut open the fallen leader's chest with his curved blade and pulled out the still warm heart. Without hesitation, he bit into it, blood streaming down his face as his army watched in stunned silence. This wasn't just brutality. Khan truly believed consuming vital organs transferred the victim's courage and knowledge to him. After every major victory, he repeated this ritual, making it central to Mongol military culture. The most horrifying display came after the Battle of Zhangdu in 1215. Khan forced 6 captured Chinese generals' families to watch as he consumed each heart, one by one. He then gave surviving nobles a choice: participate in the ritual or face immediate death. Most chose to eat human flesh rather than die. Word of these ceremonies spread across Asia like wildfire. Enemies surrendered rather than risk becoming Khan's next meal. The Heart Eater had become something beyond human. Did you know that Viking berserkers once drank human blood directly from their enemies' severed heads? In 986 AD, the legendary berserker Egil Skallagrimson shocked even hardened warriors at the Battle of Brunanburh. After slaying Saxon King Athelstan, he lifted the severed head and drank the warm blood flowing from the neck. This wasn't madness, it was ritual warfare. Berserkers believed consuming enemy blood would grant them Odin's favor and their victims strength in battle. They crafted drinking horns from human skulls, turning them into sacred vessels for blood ceremonies. After the Siege of York in 993, 200 berserkers forced English noble families to watch as they drained and consumed the blood of their defeated lords. But the most terrifying practice happened during combat itself. Living captives would be bled while still breathing, their blood used as war paint and consumed to maintain supernatural rage. These blood rituals spread terror across medieval Europe. Many historians believe these practices became the foundation for vampire legends that haunt us today. What if the samurai had discovered explosive suicide tactics during the first Mongol invasion of 1274? Instead of waiting for divine winds, Japanese warriors strapped gunpowder to themselves and charged Mongol ships. The tactic was devastatingly effective. Entire fleets were destroyed in minutes. The Mongols retreated immediately, canceling their second invasion planned for 1281. Without Chinese gunpowder influence, Japan developed firearms 3 centuries early. By 1400, samurai armies were crossing the seas with advanced weapons. Korea fell first, then coastal China. The Japanese Empire expanded rapidly across Asia. When European explorers arrived in the 1500s, they found an established Japanese naval empire. Southeast Asia was already under samurai control, blocking European colonization entirely. The samurai code evolved too, emphasizing technological innovation over sword fighting. Buddhism developed differently without the humbling near-defeat experience. By the Renaissance, Japan controlled the entire Pacific Ocean. One tactical innovation changed the course of world history forever. Did you know ancient Persian priests fed human corpses to specially trained vultures as part of their sacred burial ritual? In 6th century BC Persia, Zoroastrian priests built massive stone towers called Towers of Silence, some over 100 feet tall. These weren't just monuments, they were elaborate corpse processing facilities. The towers contained concentric circles arranged by social class, with bodies placed according to strict hierarchy. Archaeological evidence from Yazd shows towers that processed thousands of bodies annually. Priest keepers maintained entire vulture colonies, breeding the birds specifically for consuming human flesh. Zoroastrians believed earth, fire, and water were too sacred to be polluted by decaying bodies. Sky burial through vulture consumption was the only acceptable method. For over 2,000 years, this practice continued uninterrupted. Some towers still operate in India today. This ancient Persian method influenced Tibetan sky burial traditions. It remains one of the world's most environmentally sustainable funeral practices. While shocking to modern sensibilities, these towers solved death with remarkable efficiency. Did you know Vikings once skinned 500 English soldiers alive to make supernatural shields? In 1016, Danish King Canute captured an entire English garrison after a brutal siege. But instead of executing them quickly, he ordered something far worse. His shield makers would flay each prisoner while still breathing, believing the leather retained their life force. The Vikings thought shields made from enemy skin absorbed the strength of the defeated. Victims were kept conscious during the entire process to ensure maximum spiritual power transfer. This became standard Viking warfare, capturing enemies specifically for shield making rather than killing them outright. 50 years later at Stamford Bridge, Norwegian berserkers carried these human skin shields into battle. They would taunt English soldiers by revealing exactly whose flesh protected them. Warriors recognized the skin of fallen brothers, fathers, and friends stretched across enemy shields. The psychological terror was devastating. Entire formations broke before combat even began. These shields became weapons of fear that terrorized medieval Europe for generations. The practice turned protective gear into instruments of pure psychological warfare. Did you know that in 2021, archaeologists discovered a Mayan queen who ruled longer than any emperor in history? Lady Six Sky of Naranjo controlled the entire Mayan civilization from 682 to 741 AD. For nearly 60 years, she commanded armies across Guatemala, Belize, and Mexico while officially serving as regent for her young son. Recent hieroglyphic translations revealed the shocking truth about her power. At Caracal, researchers found her personal war glyphs carved into captured enemy monuments. She had systematically conquered rival city-states, including the mighty Tikal and Calakmul, through brilliant military strategy. But here's the twisted part: male scribes deliberately obscured her achievements in official records. They couldn't stand that a woman had dominated ancient warfare so completely. Her 60-year reign represents the longest rule in all of Mesoamerican history, yet for centuries she remained forgotten, erased by men who rewrote history. Lady Six Sky proved that women could command empires and crush enemies, but patriarchal narratives buried her legacy until now. What if Marcus Crassus had successfully conquered Parthia in 53 BC, opening the Silk Road for Roman expansion into China? Instead of dying in the desert, his legions would have marched eastward, reaching the Han Dynasty by 50 BC. Roman soldiers with their shields and swords would have faced Chinese crossbow armies and early gunpowder weapons. But here's where it gets interesting. Roman engineering combined with Chinese gunpowder would have created weapons centuries ahead of their time. Latin would have become the universal language from Britain to Beijing. Buddhist monks would have debated Christian philosophers in Roman forums across Asia. The Mongol invasions, impossible. A unified Roman-Chinese empire stretching 3 continents would have been unstoppable. The age of exploration would never have happened. Why sail around the world when trade routes already connected everything? The Renaissance would have started 1,000 years early with continuous access to Chinese paper, printing, and inventions. By 100 AD, Rome would have controlled the largest empire in human history. One successful battle could have changed everything. Did you know a Japanese warlord once ordered 20,000 monks to be skinned alive in just 3 days? In 1573, Oda Nobunaga stood outside Nagashima Fortress, watching his enemies surrender. These weren't ordinary soldiers, they were Ika-Iki warrior monks who dared oppose his rule. Nobunaga had earned the title Demon King for good reason. He despised Buddhism and saw these monks as obstacles to his power. Instead of quick executions, he chose something far worse. His samurai began the slow process of removing skin while keeping victims conscious. They had perfected techniques to prolong the suffering for hours. Captured monks were forced to watch their brothers die first. Knowing their fate, for 3 entire days, the screaming never stopped. Nobunaga personally supervised every moment, reportedly wearing robes made from previous victims. The brutality worked exactly as planned. Religious opposition to his authority crumbled overnight. Through absolute terror, he unified Japan under samurai rule. What if the Mongol invasion of Japan in 1281 had actually succeeded? Kublai Khan's massive fleet was approaching Japanese shores when a typhoon destroyed it completely. But imagine if those storms never came. 200,000 Mongol warriors would have overwhelmed the samurai defenders within months. Japan's legendary warrior culture would never have developed. No Bushido code, no katana legends. Instead, Japanese society would have embraced Mongol religious tolerance, blending Buddhism with Confucianism centuries earlier. Chinese gunpowder, printing, and navigation technology would have reached Japan 300 years sooner. Under unified Mongol rule, Japan and Korea would have become allied vassals, not bitter enemies. Japanese merchants would have expanded into Southeast Asia as part of the Mongol trade network. Most shocking of all, there would be no isolation period, no closed borders. Portuguese traders arrived in the 1500s, they would have found a cosmopolitan Japan already connected to global trade routes. The myth of divine protection would never exist. One successful invasion would have created a unified East Asian empire lasting centuries longer. What if the Ottoman siege of Vienna succeeded in 1683, changing the course of world history forever? Instead of marking Ottoman decline, Turkish forces would have swept through Central Europe. Habsburg Austria falls within months, leaving the German states defenseless and divided. Ottoman armies push westward, reaching the Atlantic coast through conquered France. By 1700, a massive Islamic empire stretches from Morocco to Austria. The Enlightenment develops under Ottoman religious tolerance, creating a completely different intellectual movement. European colonization begins from Turkish ports instead of Spanish and Portuguese ones. When the American Revolution erupts, Ottoman naval power supports the colonists instead of France. Under Islamic law, slavery in the New World takes an entirely different form. Christianity adapts to survive under Ottoman rule rather than dominating European culture. Scientific advances accelerate through Islamic scholarship networks spanning 3 continents. One successful siege would have created the largest empire in human history. The world we know today would be unrecognizable. What if the Phoenician traders never invented alphabetic writing around 1200 BC? The world would have remained trapped with complex hieroglyphic and cuneiform systems. Only priests and scribes could read and write, keeping knowledge locked away from common people. Greek philosophy would never have flourished without simple writing to spread ideas. Religious texts like the Bible and Quran could never exist in written form. Everything would depend on fragile oral tradition. Roman law would develop completely differently without efficient record-keeping systems. Medieval monasteries would never preserve classical knowledge through manuscript copying. The Protestant Reformation becomes impossible without printed Bibles for ordinary believers. The scientific revolution would be delayed by centuries without written communication of discoveries. Democracy could never emerge without written constitutions accessible to citizens. Human civilization would remain stuck in an oral tradition phase forever. No accumulated knowledge means no modern technology, no industrial revolution, no digital age. One missing alphabet changed everything. What if the Bering Land Bridge never formed during the last ice age, preventing humans from reaching the Americas 15,000 years ago? The continents would have remained completely uninhabited by people. Without human hunters, massive creatures like mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and giant ground sloths would have thrived across both continents. When Columbus arrived in 1492, he would have found pristine wilderness filled with prehistoric beasts instead of indigenous civilizations. European colonization would have been completely different, with unlimited land but no crops like potatoes, corn, or tomatoes. Here's the shocking part. Without these New World crops, Europe's population would have remained small. The potato alone fed millions and enabled the Industrial Revolution. Without it, technological progress would have crawled to a halt. The Americas would have become the world's greatest wildlife preserve instead of agricultural colonies. No deforestation, no cities, just endless forests and grasslands teeming with ancient megafauna. One missing land bridge would have changed the entire course of human civilization.